The old cemetery on the outskirts of town had always been a quiet place. The wind whispered through the leafless trees, and the air carried a strange stillness, as if time had frozen among the weathered tombstones. But lately, something had disturbed that silence. A dog. No one knew where it had come from, but for days it had refused to leave a single grave. Rain poured, the cold wind howled, but the dog remained, its dark eyes fixed on the dirt beneath its paws. It wasn't just resting there. It was guarding something. Locals began to notice. At first, they thought it was mourning its owner, a heartbreaking yet common sight. But as days passed, the dog's behavior became more unsettling. It wouldn't let anyone come near. Whenever someone approached, it growled low, a deep warning that sent chills down their spine. Even attempts to lure it away with food failed. It wouldn't budge. It had no collar, no signs of an owner. Just a silent, unwavering devotion to the grave beneath it. Curiosity turned into concern. The cemetery keeper, an old man who had seen his fair share of strange occurrences, finally called the police. "Something isn't right," he muttered over the phone. "I've seen animals grieve, but this isn't grief. It's something else." When the officers arrived, they found the dog exactly as described, rigid, unmoving, its body tense like a statue. One officer, a man named Carter, stepped forward cautiously. "Easy boy," he whispered, reaching a hand out. The dog's response was immediate. It let out a sharp, guttural snarl, baring its teeth. It wasn't fear. It was warning. That was enough to make Carter take a step back. The other officer, Ramirez, frowned. "Maybe something's buried there," she suggested. "Something the dog doesn't want anyone to find." The idea sent a shiver through them both. Could it be a hidden crime? A lost relic? Or something worse? There was only one way to find out. With the dog's reluctant cooperation, more like its silent, watchful presence, the officers called for a team to carefully excavate the grave. The townspeople gathered at a distance, murmuring, their unease growing with every scoop of dirt removed. Then, suddenly, the shovel hit something hard. Not a coffin. Something else. Something unexpected. The moment they saw it, their breath caught in their throats. Carter's face went pale. Ramirez took a shaky step back. The dog, still watching, gave a low whimper. Almost as if it knew. Almost as if it had been waiting for this moment. And then, Carter swallowed hard, his fingers tightening around the handle of his flashlight. Ramirez knelt down, brushing away the loose dirt, her breath coming out in uneven bursts. The crowd behind them had fallen silent, the weight of unease pressing against them like a thick fog. No one spoke. No one moved. The only sound was the wind, rustling through the empty branches above. The object beneath the dirt was smooth, cold to the touch. It wasn't part of a coffin, and it wasn't a stone. It looked almost metallic, but worn, like it had been buried for a long time. Ramirez hesitated before brushing away more dirt, revealing what looked like strange engravings along its surface. Symbols. Not words. Not anything familiar. Carter turned to the cemetery keeper. His voice hushed. "Are you sure this grave belongs to someone buried recently?" The old man nodded slowly. "Few months ago. Woman. No family came to claim her. She was found alone, in an abandoned house just outside town." He paused, glancing at the dog still standing over the grave, its eyes dark and knowing. "I don't remember anyone mentioning a dog." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. If this grave had only been here a few months, why did it feel like they had uncovered something ancient? And why was the dog acting like it had been guarding this place for much longer? Ramirez picked up her radio, her voice steady despite the chill creeping into her bones. "We need an expert down here. Someone who can identify what we just found." But before she could finish, the dog let out a sharp bark, a single piercing sound that made everyone flinch. Then, without warning, it lunged forward, digging furiously at the dirt, its paws scraping against the strange object. It was desperate, almost frantic, like it needed to reach whatever was buried beneath it before anyone else. "Hey!" Carter moved to pull the dog back, but before he could, the earth beneath them gave a sudden, unnatural shift. A deep, hollow groan echoed from below, as if something was stirring, waking up. The ground trembled. Not much. Just enough to send a shiver up Carter's spine. Ramirez's breath hitched. "Did you feel that?" Carter nodded, his heartbeat pounding against his ribs. "Yeah." The crowd behind them took a collective step back. Whispers filled the air, nervous, uncertain. The dog had stopped digging, but now it stood completely still, ears pinned back, muscles tense. Its growl was low, almost vibrating through the ground. The officers didn't move. No one did. The weight of the silence was suffocating. Then, in the distance, something cracked. A sound like breaking wood, sharp and unnatural. The wind picked up suddenly, swirling leaves through the cemetery in a chaotic dance. A shiver ran down Carter's spine. "We shouldn't be here," the cemetery keeper muttered under his breath. "Some graves, they should stay closed." But it was too late for that now. The air felt heavier now, thick with something unseen yet deeply unsettling. Carter wiped his hands on his uniform, his palms damp with sweat. Ramirez kept her eyes fixed on the strange metallic object in the dirt, her gut telling her that whatever they had uncovered, it was not supposed to be found. The dog stood rigid, its ears twitching, as if listening to something no one else could hear. The cemetery keeper took a shaky breath. This doesn't feel right," he whispered, his gaze darting toward the trees beyond the graveyard. "I've worked here for over 30 years. I've buried hundreds of people. But I've never felt anything like this before." Carter exhaled slowly, trying to steady his nerves. "What do you mean?" The old man's voice was barely above a murmur. "Some graves, you don't disturb them. Some things are meant to stay buried." His eyes flickered to the dog. "And some things remember." Before Carter could ask what he meant, Ramirez reached out and brushed the last of the dirt from the object's surface. The moment she did, the wind howled through the cemetery, an unnatural gust that sent a chill deep into their bones. The engravings on the metal glinted under the moonlight, their patterns twisting in a way that made Ramirez's stomach turn. Then, without warning, the dog let out a sharp, pained yelp and staggered back, its legs trembling. Its dark eyes were wide, no longer fierce but filled with something else, fear. It let out a low, keening whine, then turned and bolted into the darkness, disappearing into the trees. Carter cursed under his breath. "That's not a good sign." Ramirez didn't respond. She was too focused on the object, the way the strange symbol seemed almost alive. The cemetery keeper took a step back. "You need to stop," he said, his voice shaking now. "Pull it in. Get out of here." Carter was about to agree when something shifted again. A deep, muted sound, almost like a heartbeat, pulsed through the ground beneath them. It wasn't loud, but they all felt it. A dull, rhythmic vibration that sent fresh terror crawling up Ramirez's spine. Then, another sound, faint but distinct, a scraping noise. It was coming from below. Ramirez's breath caught. "Tell me you hear that." Carter nodded stiffly. His mind raced through logical explanations, but none of them made sense. The grave had been sealed. The woman buried here had been dead for months. And yet, the scraping sound grew louder, more urgent. The dirt in the shallow pit shifted slightly, as if something underneath was pushing against it. Ramirez stumbled back, heart pounding. "That's impossible." The cemetery keeper crossed himself. "I told you," he murmured. "Some graves should stay closed." Carter grabbed his radio, his fingers unsteady as he called for backup. He didn't know what he was going to tell them. A grave was making noise. A buried object was vibrating. None of it would make sense. But right now, making sense didn't matter. The moment he released the radio button, the sound stopped. Everything went still. The wind died. The leaves no longer rustled. Even the insects had gone silent. Ramirez felt a cold dread settle over her. Whatever was down there, it knew, had been heard, and now it was listening. Carter's grip on his flashlight tightened. his pulse thudding in his ears. The silence pressed down on them, unnatural and suffocating. Ramirez's breath came in short, sharp bursts as she took another step back. The grave remained still, the strange metallic object half buried in the dirt. But something had changed. They could all feel it. The scraping sound was gone, but an eerie sensation had taken its place. An overwhelming awareness, like unseen eyes were watching, waiting. Even the crowd that had gathered behind them seemed frozen, their whispers swallowed by the heavy night air. The cemetery keeper clenched his fists, his face pale. Carter swallowed hard. "We need to seal this grave back up," he muttered. Ramirez turned to him, eyes wide. "You felt that, didn't you? That noise. It wasn't in our heads." "I know." Carter exhaled slowly. "But I don't think we should keep digging." Before Ramirez could respond, the dog's sharp bark echoed through the trees. The officer spun toward the sound. It had returned, but it wasn't alone. Something rustled in the darkness behind it. The underbrush crackled as if something unseen was moving through it. Fast. The dog stood rigid, its fur bristling, growling low and deep, but it didn't charge this time. Instead, it paced back and forth near the tree line, uneasy, anxious. Then the air shifted. A sudden drop in temperature made the hairs on the back of Carter's neck stand up. The wind picked up again, but this time it didn't feel natural. It carried a whisper, a faint, breathy sound that seemed to curl around them like fingers reaching from the dark. Ramirez tensed. "Tell me you heard that." Carter's voice was tight. "I heard it." The cemetery keeper took another step back. "You should leave. Now." The dirt beneath the metallic object shifted again. A small, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the ground. Ramirez's stomach twisted. It was as if something beneath them had stirred ever so slightly, just enough to let them know it was still there, still waiting. Then, another sound, faint but unmistakable. Breath. Not wind. Not an echo. A real breath, slow and deep, rising from the earth below. Ramirez's blood ran cold. Carter's fingers hovered over his holster, even though he knew no weapon would help against whatever this was. The metallic object in the dirt suddenly pulsed, just once, emitting a soft vibration that hummed through their bones. The dog barked again, louder this time, almost frantic. It turned and ran toward the grave, paws skidding against the dirt as it began digging furiously once more. The crowd gasped, stumbling backward. Ramirez's hands shook. "What is it trying to get to?" Carter didn't answer. His heart was hammering now, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He took a slow step forward, against every instinct screaming at him to turn and run. He knelt beside the metallic object, hesitating for just a moment before reaching out. The second his fingers brushed against the surface, a jolt shot through him, like static but deeper. It wasn't just a shock. It was something else. Presence. The earth trembled again, stronger this time. The whispering wind turned into something more, a low, distant sound like voices just beyond the edge of hearing. The cemetery keeper clutched his chest, shaking his head. "You don't understand," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've woken it up." Before anyone could react, the ground beneath them gave a sudden, violent shudder. A crack split through the dirt, small at first, then widening. The dog yelped and leaped back. Then silence. A moment of eerie stillness. And then, from deep beneath the grave, something knocked. The knock sent a shockwave through the cemetery. It wasn't loud, but it was deliberate. 3 slow, hollow thuds from beneath the grave. The kind of sound that didn't happen by accident. The kind that meant something was down there. Something aware. Carter staggered back, his breath catching in his throat. Ramirez clamped a hand over her mouth, eyes locked on the cracked earth. The crowd behind them gasped, a ripple of fear surging through the onlookers. Someone muttered a prayer. Someone else turned and ran. The cemetery keeper's voice was barely a whisper. "I told you." The dog let out a low, trembling growl, its ears flattened, but it didn't move. It just stood there, staring at the grave with wide, unblinking eyes. It wasn't trying to dig anymore. It was waiting. Then the knock came again. Louder. More forceful. Carter felt his stomach twist. He didn't believe in ghosts. He didn't believe in curses. But this wasn't normal. Nothing about this was normal. He grabbed his radio, his voice tight. "We need backup. Now." Ramirez's hands were shaking. What if we opened it?" Carter turned to her, horrified. "Are you insane?" She swallowed hard. "If something's down there, we need to know what." Before he could argue, the cemetery keeper spoke again. His voice sharp with fear. "Don't." Ramirez hesitated. "Why?" The old man's gaze darkened. "Because it's not trying to get out." His eyes flickered to the metallic object still half buried in the dirt. It was put there for a reason. The wind picked up again, but this time it carried something else, a scent. Not decay. Not earth. Something metallic, sharp, almost electric. Ramirez coughed, waving a hand in front of her nose. Carter smelled it too, something unnatural curling in the air like static before a storm. Then, without warning, the dog whimpered and backed away, its tail tucked between its legs. It wasn't growling anymore. It was afraid. The dirt inside the grave shifted. Just slightly. Just enough for Ramirez to see it. Hand. Pale. Too pale. Not fresh but not skeletal. Frozen in time. Ramirez's breath hitched. Carter grabbed her arm and yanked her back. "We are sealing this grave. Right now." But the earth had other plans. The ground trembled beneath them, another deep, pulsing vibration rising through the dirt. The symbols on the metallic object flickered, just for a second, as if they had absorbed the energy around them. The dog whined, bolting toward the trees, disappearing into the darkness. And then, as the wind howled through the cemetery, something impossible happened. The hand moved. Ramirez gasped, stumbling backward as the pale hand twitched. Carter grabbed her arm, dragging her away from the grave as the ground beneath them trembled again. The crowd screamed, some running, others frozen in terror. The cemetery keeper's face had gone completely white, his lips moving in silent prayer. Then, with a slow, unnatural movement, the hand pushed against the dirt, fingers curling as if grasping for something unseen. The grave let out a deep, hollow groan, like the earth itself was protesting. A wave of cold air rushed up from the opening, carrying that sharp, metallic scent, making Carter's stomach twist. Ramirez shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "This isn't possible." The metallic object in the dirt pulsed again, its strange engravings glowing faintly. Carter had seen enough. He reached for his radio again, but before he could speak, the hand clenched into a fist, tight, desperate, and with a sudden, violent jerk it pulled downward as if something beneath had grabbed it. The ground convulsed, the dirt shifting unnaturally, closing in over the hand as if swallowing it whole. The pulsing stopped. The wind died instantly. And then nothing. The grave was still again. Ramirez's breath was ragged. What just happened? Carter didn't answer. His pulse pounded in his ears. It was as if whatever had tried to break free had been pulled back at the last second. The cemetery keeper exhaled shakily, his voice hoarse. "It was never trying to escape. It was trying to warn you." The words sent an icy chill through Carter. His gaze flickered to the metallic object, now completely still, its strange glow gone. He had a sinking feeling that they had just witnessed something they were never meant to see. The dog had vanished into the darkness. The crowd had thinned, leaving only a few terrified stragglers whispering among themselves. The ground where the hand had emerged looked undisturbed, as if nothing had happened at all. Ramirez ran a shaking hand through her hair. We should close this up." Carter didn't argue. He didn't want to be here any longer than necessary. As they worked quickly to cover the disturbed earth, the weight in the air slowly lifted, the strange presence fading. But the unease never left. As they finished, Ramirez glanced toward the trees. "Where do you think the dog went?" Carter sighed. Maybe it knew better than we did. The cemetery keeper stepped forward, his voice heavy with something Carter couldn't quite place. You should leave this place alone now. Some things are meant to stay buried. Carter met his gaze and, for once, had no argument. As they packed up, the night returned to silence. No wind, no whispers, nothing but the distant hum of the city beyond the graveyard. But just as Carter turned to leave, something in the dirt caught his eye. Barely visible in the moonlight, carved into the earth, right where the hand had appeared. Single word. Run. Carter stared at the word carved into the dirt, his breath catching in his throat. The letters were shallow, barely there, as if they had been formed in the last moments before the earth had sealed itself again. His mind screamed for logic, for some rational explanation, but none came. Ramirez saw it too. She didn't speak. She just stood there, frozen, her eyes locked onto the grave. Carter could feel the weight of her thoughts pressing into the air between them. This wasn't over. Whatever had just happened, whatever they had disturbed, had left them a message. The cemetery keeper took a slow step forward and knelt, brushing his fingers lightly over the dirt. His expression was unreadable. It tried to warn you, he muttered again. And now it's too late. Carter exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Whoa. No, this doesn't make sense. That grave has been there for months. Whoever was buried here wasn't meant to rest, the old man interrupted, his voice almost mournful. And now neither will you. Ramirez shuddered. What does that mean? The cemetery keeper didn't answer. He simply stood, dusted his hands off and walked away, disappearing into the night as if he wanted no part in whatever came next. Carter turned to Ramirez. We don't talk about this. She nodded slowly. Agreed. They finished filling in the grave, making it look undisturbed, and packed up their equipment. The cemetery felt empty now, hollow, as if whatever had been lurking beneath had finally settled, or had been silenced. Either way, the strange energy in the air had dissipated. As they reached their patrol car, Carter glanced back one last time. The graveyard was still, the trees swaying gently in the night breeze. Nothing out of place. Just another silent resting place for the dead. But he knew better. Ramirez climbed into the car and exhaled loudly. I need a drink. Carter chuckled dryly, rubbing his temple. I need a week off. They pulled away from the cemetery, leaving the unmarked grave behind. The drive back was quiet. Neither of them spoke about what they had seen, what they had felt. There were no words for it. By the time Carter got home, exhaustion had settled into his bones. He locked the door behind him, kicked off his boots, and collapsed onto the couch. The weight of the night pressed down on him. His mind replayed the moment the hand had disappeared, the word left in the dirt, the strange pulsing of the metallic object. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. A message from Ramirez. You okay? He hesitated before typing back. You. Was. Then, feel like something's watching me. Carter stared at the screen. A cold feeling crept down his spine. He glanced around his apartment, the dim glow of the streetlights casting long shadows against the walls. It was just her nerves. Their nerves. Right. His fingers hovered over the keyboard before he finally replied. Get some sleep. We'll talk tomorrow. Ramirez didn't text back. Carter sighed, rubbing his face. He needed to stop thinking about it. It was over. Whatever happened, whatever was in that grave, it was buried again. He forced himself to his feet and headed to his bedroom, peeling off his uniform. The moment his head hit the pillow, sleep took him. But it didn't last. At exactly 3:07 a.m., he woke up gasping, his heart pounding against his ribs. The air in the room was thick, suffocating. Something was wrong. He turned onto his side, trying to shake the feeling, and froze. In the dim light, just at the foot of his bed, the shadows shifted. Not moving, not obvious, but different. His pulse hammered. He reached for his phone, his breath shallow, sweat slicking his palms. His fingers trembled as he lifted the screen. One new message. No sender. No number. Just a single word. Run. Carter's blood turned to ice. He sat up too fast, his vision swimming, his entire body screaming at him to move. But he didn't. He couldn't. 'Cause now he heard it. Sound. Faint. Just outside his window. Slow, deliberate knock. 3 times. Hello. Echoing. Just like in the grave.